Hey, Mike?
So for the folks who are in the library, is Ashley and Vivian, are they present?
Vivian is unable to attend today,
Okay,
and we have not seen Ashley, but last meeting she did attend, I think, at her office.
okay,
I'm not sure if she's doing that again or not.
okay, thank you. Okay, so in the interest of time, I think we should get moving forward. I have Ashley is not currently present. Faye Williams is not currently present.
There is
Patricia.
somebody in the waiting room. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, okay.
Might be Faye.
Okay, so hopefully we'll have that. I do have Patricia Hilliard Nunn. I know Paul Ortiz just wrote us and he's not able to attend. And it looks as though Vivian is unable to attend as well. And I'm not sure who's in the waiting room.
Carly,
Yeah,
it's Roger. She's having some technical difficulties here at the library with some
okay.
of those, so she's working on that right now. If there's somebody else in the waiting room.
Okay, if you guys are cool, we can kind of hold up for a few minutes. Thank you. you guys watch the school board meeting? No, it was really good.
Wasn't it very long?
It was very
That's what I
long.
thought. That's-
Yeah. It was another one of the, I think it went almost midnight again.
Well, after watching FHSAA meetings, I don't know that I could tolerate the school board meetings at the same time about all this. So it was hard enough watching those.
Yeah, they're intense.
Well, a lot of decisions to be made that they had no, options. It's tough decisions.
Exactly.
Are they taped as are the others?
Yes, they are. The district has a YouTube channel and you'll have them there. And, so I think this is like the 4th or 5th where it's been like 6 or more hours long.
Yeah, I was on the last one that went to almost 1 a.m. So
Yeah.
Hey, Carly, we're good here now. She's ready. It's all ready.
Okay,
Nobody else is in the waiting room.
She said nobody else is in the waiting room, so everybody's been,
okay, so then, yeah, it looks like Ashley is not here at the moment. Faye is not here.
Ashley's
Will
joining
not
now.
be able to attend, and Vivian won't be able to attend.
Ashley and Faye are joining now.
Oh, Ashley's here now. Okay,
Yes.
great.
and she said Faye is also joining.
Faye is coming.
Yeah, well, I see her phone number right
Great.
up on the screen, so.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess what I have as my understanding is that we were going to conclude the discussion, which we had the 10 remaining individuals, and then we needed to discuss our process, which I have a feeling that might take some time. And then we need to discuss how we're going to actually conduct the final vote. And then our next steps after that. Is this, does everybody agree this is the direction to go? Okay.
Yes. Just say those three one more time so I'll make sure I get them in my notes. I'm sorry, I was dealing with the attendance.
Oh, say it one more time.
Yeah, sorry, Carly, if you don't mind, I was just making sure I had the attendance part of the clerk notes correct.
So our current agenda that we're going to try to follow is we're going to conclude the 10 remaining individuals in the discussion of the recommendation list. Then our next item is to actually discuss the process, which I think you brought up some topics and some other people did that we need to make sure we address. And then we need to discuss actually the voting process and how that will work out, and as well as determining the next steps of how we inform the superintendent as well as the board. And then we do need to also come up with recommendations for future committees. I am not thinking that we're going to get to all of these things today, but that's kind of the direction we're going. All right, so Hal, you were helping us last meeting with keeping track of the names that we need to go through. Do you have the name of the next item?
Yes, and if anyone needs to follow the meeting minutes that I opened this morning or shortly after shortly before the meeting, I've already got them sort of listed in order. So if you need to see where I'm going, the next name on the list is Thelma M. Jordan, a person.
Would anyone like to speak to this individual? Hal. Hal, sorry, you're muted.
Sorry, this is not an individual that I knew much about prior to our process. So I'm grateful for the historians and others that helped to contribute information on this name as well as the public. Thelma Jordan was the first female Black principal in Alachua County and an educator here for 48 years. And her story is remarkable and is covered in one of the Gainesville Sun articles that was shared with us by the person who submitted the name, as well as another article that was shared, I believe, by Peggy. I know that in discussions that I've had with individuals sort of affiliated with the school, with regards to the name options, I think this one is one that is popular because of her prominent role. And I think there is also generally a feeling that an African-American female could be a positive name with regards to the name choices, because women in particular, and African-American women specifically, are underrepresented in sort of honor area.
All right, thank you. We did just get an email that Chipper kind of fell out for a second because of a computer issue, but it looks like he's trying to get back on. So hopefully he'll join. Does anyone else want to speak on this item? No? Okay, thank you. How can you tell us the next item?
The next option on the list is Seminary Lane, a non-person option, referencing a place.
Okay. Would anyone like to share some observations about this name or historical content? Okay. Kali.
Yes, as development is happening in Fifth Avenue neighborhood, Seminary Lane could be a memorial to a wiped out and long loved housing area. I don't know all of its history in the neighborhood. I know that's been a name used in the neighborhood going way back. I don't know the details of that, but I do know about Seminary Lane Apartments and the fight to restore supported housing there. And it's a current extreme issue in anti-gentrification in Gainesville.
Thank you. Kim.
My understanding is Seminary Lane is another name for Fifth Avenue. It was also called Seminary Lane.
Okay.
And that one thing that I'll add is, in discussions with some of the stakeholders that I've interacted with, I think many are fond of the place names that are affiliated with the neighborhood, Fifth Avenue, Pleasant Street, and Seminary Lane. Of those three, it seems as though the general sort of feeling is that Seminary Lane may be maybe less favorable than the other two, maybe partly because the affiliation with seminary having a religious connotation, whereas the other two are more neutral names that still reference the same African-American neighborhoods.
Richard had a comment.
Oh,
excuse me. Yes, I was going to say it was called Seminary Lane before all the streets in Gainesville were renamed and given numbers. Isn't that right?
I'm not quite sure.
Does Peggy know? Do you know, Peggy?
Yeah, there's actually a list through the Alachua County Library where you could see the original street names and then the street names after the switch to the grid system. Fred Aubrey is a volunteer at the Matheson who's done extensive work in that. And unfortunately, with the switch to the grid system, they actually redid the names twice because the first time they forgot to start at 0. So it's very meticulous. There's more information at the Matheson Library and Archives, part of the Matheson History Museum, which has old Gainesville city directories. But you'll also find those place names on certain streets, such as Pleasant Street. And I believe Seminary Lane is also marked there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Peggy, does Pleasant Street happen in a certain like east or west of 13th and Seminary Lane is on the other end? Like, did they have them at the same time, or was Fifth Avenue, Street and Seminary Lane kind of all the same, the entire length of it?
It's like Brady Bunch. Kim has her hand up, so I'm going to defer to Kim.
Okay, Kim.
I might be wrong. Fifth Avenue was never called Pleasant Street. Pleasant Street is a different street in the neighborhood. Fifth Avenue was originally called Seminary Lane, is my understanding.
Another point to add on to what Kim is saying is that our conception of what is Gainesville now has really shifted to the west, and much of the area, for instance, where Finley was, a lot of this area was developed more recently. Basically you had a lot of dirt roads anywhere from about 34th Street. That was just the boondocks, Northwest 34th Street. So much of Gainesville was downtown Gainesville, several blocks east and west of Gainesville. At the University of Florida, when it opened, when classes officially opened, that was the outskirt. That was not Gainesville, right? That was cow pasture. So that would be, if you draw a line heading from UF campus heading north, that would intersect with the area we're talking about. It just wasn't developed the way the historic Pleasant Street, which is one of Gainesville's historic districts, and which was built by Friedman during Reconstruction. So Pleasant Street technically might be a stretch to say it would go as far west as 1912 Northwest Fifth Avenue, but symbolically, it's no different really from if the name Union Academy or a Liberty Hill were adopted. Liberty Hill and Union Academy were not located there either, but they represent a time in Gainesville's Reconstruction history. I hope that helps.
Madam Chair, Hal had his hand up frantically.
Well, it wasn't frantic. I just was trying to answer the question that Kim was answering. So you can actually look at the property records today if you went to the Alachua County Map Genius interface, and even on Google Maps, and you zoomed in, you could actually look at the school zoning district for this elementary school, and it encapsulates University Park, which is sort of towards the farthest, one of the farthest west neighborhoods. It encapsulates Florida Park. And then as you continue to move east across 13th Street, then it encapsulates the Fifth Avenue neighborhood. And if you go further east from that, it encapsulates the Pleasant Street Historic District. So they're all technically part of the zoning for this school, and they all have this connectivity through Fifth Avenue, which the school is on, and you can take Fifth Avenue from the school straight east, and you can interact and interface with all of these historic neighborhoods with very strong African-American heritage. And I think, regardless of the outcome of this process, I think it would be lovely to see if and how the elementary school might tie that African-American history into their Florida history lesson planning, and potentially consider doing walking tours into those neighborhoods, which are actually close enough that those could be very easy walking tours straight from the school.
Peggy.
But for the perspective of history at the time, the name wouldn't really have applied to the location 1912, just because this was outside the realm of Gainesville. Gainesville, when it was originally platted in 1854, was the old courthouse and 8 blocks around it. And it continued to expand over the years. But, not far from the current location of J.J. Finley today, the former Finley School, not far from there at 16th Avenue, where there's a Briarwood neighborhood today. My mother used to go in high school as a GHS student, and that was Inspiration Point because there was nothing there.
Okay.
Thanks for the history lessons. Appreciate it.
Rachel, you had a statement?
No, I was just wondering, like, for the sake of time, if Flo is still taking minutes.
Time?
Yeah, for each like discussion.
Madam Chair, we did not agree on that as the guidelines, but I'll be happy to do the 4 minutes if Some people expressed an interest in making that time longer, given that we're dealing with the increased popularity of the names that we're discussing today. So as I said, we haven't discussed if we want to do time limits or not. I'm happy to keep time if that's what we decide.
I suppose I was under the impression we would just do the 4 minutes from our last meeting. And I think what we could possibly do, like what we had to modify with Josiah Walls, is that when we run into a situation where we think we need to devote more time, let's just make it a case by case.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I didn't keep track, but I'm pretty sure that was 4 minutes for.
That felt good. All right, so what is our next one, Hal?
The next name on the list is Pleasant Street, a non-person name referencing the place.
Okay, there's a lot of similarities in this topic. So does anyone want to speak to this item? Hal?
Yeah, just since we didn't directly say it in the last one, if it wasn't clear, the Fifth Avenue Pleasant Street area is a historic district on the National Registry of Historic Places. It's also a community redevelopment district as part of our community redevelopment agency here in our local community. So it has a very strong and well-known affiliation historically with African-American heritage in that region of our city.
Kim, you mentioned that Pleasant Street was a different road. Do you know which road Pleasant Street is currently?
I do not. I know it's within Finley's zone, but my understanding is Fifth Avenue was never called Pleasant Street. Pleasant Street was, but was one of the streets nearby Seminary Lane or Fifth Avenue. But it's also used for that neighborhood, the Pleasant Street neighborhood.
Kali?
Pleasant Street is the part east of 6th Street. Fifth Avenue is the neighborhood west of 6th Street. And I think Pleasant Street may be what is now northwest 2nd Street, but I'm not completely sure of that.
Hal had a comment.
I was just going to say, if it's helpful in the context document that we had previously put together when we were considering these 25 names, there are links in there referencing some of these boundings, north, south, east, and west of the different neighborhoods, if it's helpful.
Okay. It will be. I have the printed version, so the links won't work, but I will definitely review those again. Okay. Thank you. Hal, can you tell us the next item?
The next name is Matthew M. Louis, a person.
Would anyone like to speak to Mr. Louis?
First, I'm sorry, Carly, we lost y'all here at the school. Something happened, but everybody's back now, so we're good to go if you didn't notice.
Well, I saw you kind of blink for a minute. How long were you guys
Not long. It couldn't,
Okay.
it was less than a minute, 60, so
Okay.
we're good.
Great, thank you.
Right.
Zohara, did you want to speak with this?
Yes, and I just want to say that there's a pretty bad storm brewing in my neighborhood, so I too may lose power. And I just want you all to know if that happens, it's because of the storm. I certainly am no historian, and I thought I would just raise some of the things that Paul Ortiz did in his email that he sent to us. He talks about Louis and Walls, but to focus in on things he said about Louis, He said they were courageous, internationally known political leaders. Louis was the first mayor of Noonanville. He founded the Gainesville Sentinel, served in the state legislature, founded the Associated Negro Press, an international wire service for Black newspaper, was a fierce supporter of Ida B. Wells Barnett. And if you all will recall, Barnett led the anti-lynching efforts in our country. Louis also, he led the Pensacola streetcar boycott against segregation. Louis also was a co-founder of the Independent Party of Florida in 1884, and this party was founded explicitly as an interracial political party to stop the spread of white supremacy in Florida, and it was started in Gainesville. So those are some things. Of course, Louis was also a soldier in the Union Army, and he was wounded so severely at the Battle of Honey Hill that many thought he had been killed. And in fact, it was incorrectly stated that he had died of his wounds, officially stated, but this was not the case.
Richard, you had your hand up as well?
Well, I was just going to say, he was wounded 3 times in the Civil War. The last time was what Zahara mentioned, when he was basically left on the battlefield for dead.
Karen.
I found a good article. It was in the Alligator yesterday. It's online, and it's about Matthew Louis, and it's his. It talks about his descendant, who I think lives in Jacksonville, and how disappointed he is that Louis has not received the recognition that he deserves. He is buried in Mount Pleasant Cemetery.
Where is that? Here, you mean? The
Excuse
one
me?
here? The one
Yes.
here? Oh,
Yes, he has a federal marker there, and he married a Chestnut. He married the daughter of Johnson and Maria Chestnut, so he would have been a distant cousin to the present day Chestnuts.
Madam Chair, we have time.
Okay, thank
Well,
you.
we don't have time, it's expired.
Okay. Well, that was a very interesting discussion. Thank you. Hal, can you name the next individual?
The next name is Liberty Hill, a non-person name referencing a facility, I believe.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to Liberty Hill? Richard.
Liberty Hill was constructed, I think, in 1875 and served as the school, really the only school for the Rutledge community. And it was K through 12. I think one of the interesting things about Liberty Hill School is it's still standing. You can drive by and see it today. So it served it was the educational facility for the Black community, sort of in, well, now we would say the western part of Gainesville, but then it would have been more the western part of Alachua County, I guess. So it's a very historic, very prominent building, and occupies a very prominent place in Black history of Alachua County, I believe.
Where is Rutledge neighborhood?
Rutledge neighborhood is west of 51st going all the way to maybe it's 91st, the school that goes in the road that goes in front of Santa Fe, south of 39th, and north of 23rd. And there are remnants of Rutledge still around. The Rutledge Cemetery is still going. And there are little pockets that are remnants of the Rutledge neighborhood still today. And there are a few, well, there's the Second Morning Star Baptist Church is on the border of Rutledge, and Liberty Hill United Methodist Church is right by the school. My guess is that the school building is on the property of Liberty Hill United Methodist Church.
Karen's nodding her head, yes.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything else they would like to say about Liberty Hill? Thank you, Richard. That was very helpful. Al, can you share the next item?
The next option on the list is Union Academy, a non-person name referencing a facility, I believe.
And would anyone like to speak to Union Academy? Okay, so I have Kali, Richard, and Peggy. Kali, would you start, please?
The site that is now Rosa B. Williams Community Center is where Union Academy stood, an early education site for the children of freedmen in Alachua County. And it was an outstanding school. It started as a one-story building. They added a second story. Some of that staff and administrators moved over to Lincoln on Fifth Avenue later on.
Thank you. Richard, and then Peggy.
Yes, I would say that as I understand it, Union Academy was sort of the cultural and educational center of the Black community in Gainesville. It was started during Reconstruction, late 1860s, by the Freedmen's Bureau. As an American historian, I'm really drawn to this name because, like Liberty Hill, it occupied a very important place in Black history in Alachua County, just a different location. I think that Union Academy also would offer lots of opportunities for historical investigation among the students at the school, into Reconstruction, into the Freedmen's Bureau, into General Oliver Otis Howard, who was the head of the Freedmen's Bureau. There were some prominent Black people. Actually, I think Louis was maybe on the board, or Johnson Chestnut, somebody that we've considered was on the board of Union Academy. So it would be a very good option for the school, I think. Personally, on a personal note, I'm drawn a little bit more to a name of a person or a thing, as opposed to, say, the name of a street. Fifth Avenue. I understand the significance of Fifth Avenue, but to me personally, that's kind of like a concept, whereas a person or a thing is more specific.
Thank you, Peggy. I think you may have to talk fast.
Oh, sorry.
No, I don't have to speak.
Okay.
There's time, 1 minute and 20 seconds.
Oh, okay. So you actually can talk slow.
Well, if you're more interested in Union Academy, Murray Laurie wrote a history that's published in the Florida Historical Quarterly that you could access. There are also postcards showing Union Academy available at the Matheson History Museum. It was Gainesville's Freedmen's Bureau school. So as Richard said, it offers a lot of opportunity to discuss local history as it connects to national history. Many people say, I don't do local history. They kind of look down on local history. But if you look at an example of local history, such as Union Academy, you could teach about slavery when it was illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write. And then you could teach Reconstruction, where Black residents such as Johnson Chestnut pushed to have a school, which became Union Academy. You could even teach about how whites resisted it by throwing rocks into the windows of the school regularly. All of this is in that history that Marie Laurie wrote.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone else? Thank you. Hal, can you tell us the next item?
The next item on the list is Fifth Avenue, a non-person name referencing a place.
And yeah, Stephanie. Okay.
All right, trying to unmute myself, I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to speak on Fifth Avenue, which is kind of like the same as Liberty Hill, not Liberty Hill, Pleasant Street and Seminary Lane. I feel like this name would help combine the desires of several different groups in our community. And we have one school of thought that it should be named after a person, that will, I'm sorry, I'm having a rough day, that will shed light on some Black history that way. We also have community members that are looking for a name that is for our school that's not a person, because they're just worried about having to go through this again. And I feel like having something like Fifth Avenue would help, try to meet as many people and groups that we can. I also think that if we name it after one person, then although that's a great story, I like how Khalid said something about, I think it was yesterday, about everything having a story. And that's how I teach in my classroom. Whatever I'm teaching, I bring whatever story I can. So when we talk about integration and we talk about Ruby Bridges and all these people, and they're following along, it's not until I give them a story, a local story, or someone they know, which is me, because my family actually reintegrated Ocoee, Florida, 58 years after the Ocoee massacre. So I was the only Black student in an all racist, very racist town for a very long time. So I know what integration is, and I still have parents from years ago who every time, because their kids felt that so strongly that they still send me, anytime Ocoee's in the news, which is a lot lately, I get messages from them, they're so excited. And I feel like with Fifth Avenue, we have so many stories to tell. We can talk about the historically famous people that came. We can talk about the locally famous people who are somewhere on this list that are there, but we can also tell the stories of the everyday people and the culture and the community. And I think those community stories really gets the student, they're drawn to them. And I just think there's so many stories to be told. And I also, as a teacher, I'm one of those ones where you give me one little idea and I run with it, And so when I started thinking about that, I started thinking about the fact that we have this foyer and we can turn it into just like a museum. We can have those pictures of all of these people. We can ask the community, please send us pictures, of you when you were 17 in front of mom's kitchen, and I just feel like they could see that. I mean, some of their grandparents came from, we have actually faculty members here that grew up on Fifth Avenue. And I just feel like there are so many stories. And in a classroom, parents don't really question, well, you're teaching about this person, you're teaching about that person. And they don't, because they trust me, because they know my integrity, they know my heart. But I feel like I just don't want to put a name on a building and ruin or tarnish the name of somebody that I would have loved to teach in my classroom. And so, I really feel strongly about that. And, I understand that this was not exactly in that neighborhood, but I feel like it would be a way to really just, remember them. I mean, like Holly was saying, gentrification was like, it's not going to be there. We can't stop this. They're not listening, and this is a way we can remember what happened there. And as someone who, when I moved to Gainesville, I've never seen a Black community, never. I stood in front of mirrors and practiced speaking like these people that look like me. I had my mom braid my hair so I can look like these people that look like me, because I had never seen I've never seen this before. And the Black community means so much to me. And I want to teach the whole thing. And I just feel like having Fifth Avenue on the front of our building, you know, I can, when they say, well, why is it Fifth Avenue? I can teach that every day. You know, I can teach a person, it's one lesson, maybe two, I can stretch it out. You know, I've stretched a paragraph about Fort Mosaic in St. Augustine off for several days, just a paragraph. I can stretch it out. But with Fifth Avenue, there's so many things I can choose from. And I mean, there's something I can pull from every direction. And as a teacher, I feel like it's important that we think about what can the teachers do with this name. And that's it.
Madam Chair, time is up. However, I see two.
Yeah. Yeah, if everybody is okay, if we could have 2 more people speak to this. So how?
2 more minutes added.
2 minutes each, or 2?
Yes.
Total? Sorry, Flo, I missed that.
Yes, per person.
Okay, so Hal, please.
I won't take too much longer. I think that Stephanie really eloquently expressed a lot of the feelings that I've heard staff and faculty at the school as well as parents express. I think that this is a bridge building name. I think that for me personally, a key, if we were to consider non-person name, is that it should not be neutral in a benign way. It should be fully embedded and immersed and embracing of African-American history as part of this truth and reconciliation process. And I think that a name like this would allow a lot of immediate opportunity for us to pass that forward in the recommendation, as well as long-term flexibility and creative license for the staff and faculty to integrate it into, as Stephanie mentioned, memoriam in the school, as well as lesson planning. And I'd also like to mention that the Flyers nickname for this school is something that the students are fond of. It's something that the teachers teach with, about flying high and achieving great things. And many of the parents and students that have expressed a liking for this name have also mentioned that it has a nice alliteration as Fifth Avenue Flyers, and would allow and engender the school to keep its past nickname while removing the trauma and getting rid of the tragic history of the original name.
Thank you, Kim.
Also, we have had a group of teachers, and I have had some presence at the Fifth Avenue Festival that's held every year. And I would love to, this name would really give leverage to push into that more and more completely as a school. I'd love to have our kids singing at it. I'd love to have art displayed at it. So it's a sort of a natural way to go if we had this name.
Thank you. Okay. Can we have the next item, please?
The next option is John Dukes Jr., a person.
And who would like to speak to John Dukes Jr.? Okay, thank you. Peggy, then Kim.
Just briefly recounting from the information I put in before, Dukes was the last principal of Lincoln High School before it was closed in the middle of the 1969-70 school year, first principal of Eastside High School. So there's a connection to our local history of education, and I'll leave it at that.
Kim.
Also, his son, also named John Dukes, who still lives in the community, was one of 4 students who did integrate the school in the late 60s.
Integrate which school, Kim? Was it
Finley. JJ Finley.
Finley, okay.
Jeffrey.
And I believe his grandson also attended the school as well. So there's a strong connection between them. Principal Dukes is an icon in Gainesville in the African American community. His service is quite significant, and he also, I think, worked in the school administration as well for a good period.
Karen is nodding.
Okay, thank you. Hal, what is next on our item?
The next name option is Johnson Chestnut, a person.
Who would like to speak to Johnson Chestnut? Go on, Peggy, I know you want to talk.
I was really hoping that Karen, who has thoroughly researched and lived with the legacy, would speak.
Karen, please.
Okay, Johnson Chestnut was enslaved by the Chestnut family. Serena Hale was a Chestnut, so Johnson was brought with the Hale family to Alachua County in 1854. He is known through oral history as being a very talented furniture maker. We have at the Hale homestead some pieces that he reportedly made, very fine pieces of furniture. He was a carpenter by trade, and he was, after emancipation, he was on the original board of trustees for Union Academy. He was also served on the Gainesville City Commission in the late 1860s, and he has his legacy is still here in Alachua County. His descendants, as you all know, have been very active in local politics, and we have Chuck Chestnut right now is his descendant sitting on the county commission.
Thank you very much. Peggy.
And I want to briefly add, what I know is through being inspired by Karen, I went out to tour the historic Hale homestead at Kanapahal Plantation with Karen 5 years ago. And somehow hours went by and it felt like 5 minutes. And I was so moved by the research Karen has done, and in particular, the story of Johnson Chestnut, because he didn't choose to come to Alachua County. He was brought here enslaved, and after emancipation, moved to Gainesville and became a community leader and the first Black alderman in 1868, and contributed to Alachua County schools by helping make possible the establishment of the first Freedmen's Bureau school here in Gainesville. So I think it's such a moving story, going from slavery to freedom and leadership in politics in the community and education right here in Alachua County. And as Karen mentioned, the legacy continues with descendants, including Charles Chestnut II, working on civil rights, and also our current county commissioner, Chuck Chestnut, carrying on the legacy.
Thank you. Both of you, that was very interesting and helpful. Hal, what is our next item?
The next item is Carolyn B. Walker, or excuse me, Carolyn B. Parker, a person. I apologize.
Thank you. Peggy.
So I had never heard of Carolyn Parker until this committee, and somebody suggested her name. I've done as much research as I can since seeing the name, and she seems to have come to the nation's attention in late 2019 as the first Black woman to get a postgraduate degree in physics. She graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's degree from Fisk, then moved on to get 2 master's degrees, one in math from University of Michigan and one in physics from MIT, and was completing her PhD. She would have been the first Black woman in the nation to get a PhD in physics, but she died. because of radiation exposure. She worked with polonium as part of the Manhattan Project, working on the Dayton Project. And they were working on trying to stop, they were in a race with Germany, right? There was a Nazi work going on to build the atomic weapon. That was these scientists' understanding. It was understanding they had to defend the nation from these new atomic bombs by working on their own. Later, when Germany was defeated, these scientists actually signed a petition that Leo Szilard organized to President Truman, imploring him not to use the weapon they'd worked so hard to build against the Japanese because it wasn't the plan. Ultimately, scholars show that that letter was barred from making it to Truman. The military prevented that from happening. But what we have with Carolyn Beatrice Parker is a woman born in Gainesville who died in Gainesville at age 48, that's my age, and who taught in Alachua County Public Schools and also at Fisk, was going to be on track to be the first Black woman to get a PhD in physics. But really, she sacrificed her life for the good of the nation in working on the Manhattan Project. We won't get the details of what she did because it was top secret. Her own family said she couldn't talk about it with them. But this is another inspiration. This is a conversation starter, and she's received no recognition. So currently we're considering potentially naming the school for one of several people on the list who already have other facilities named for them. Parker has received no recognition.
Thank you. Kim and then Hal.
My understanding is that Ms. Parker taught school in Gainesville. I don't know what school, but in 1939 and 1940, the school currently or formerly known as Finley started in 1939. So there's an overlap there.
Thank you. And Hal?
I just wanted to add that in discussions with stakeholders affiliated with the school, students, parents, as well as faculty and staff, this name and Carolyn Parker's legacy, I think, appeals to many people. I think many people have been inspired, like Peggy suggested, by this emergence of her story that has been sort of lost. She is truly one of these hidden figures. I remember watching the Hidden Figures film with my daughters and the sense of wonder that they had learning about the amazing women that contributed to the space program. And I think the same sense of wonder that my daughters felt watching the Hidden Figures film about those real women, I think the students would feel a similar sense of wonder learning about Carolyn B. Parker. This is definitely one of the names that seems to be most frequently mentioned with regards to the name person name options.
Madam Chair, time is up, but Richard has his hand up, so I move that we extend the time 2 more minutes per person.
That sounds great. Richard?
Just a very quick question. Is she buried here in Gainesville?
Yes, at Mount Pleasant, and I forgot, this is her picture, and this is the only picture I could find of her. And I had also neglected to mention that there's no school in Alachua County, no public school named for a Black woman, none.
You said she's buried at Mount Pleasant.
Yes.
Thank you.
She died in 1966. She was born in 1917. So she would have been a baby during the influenza pandemic of 1918-19 for teachability, right? There's so many lessons you could teach through her life. What it would have been like. She was one of 6 children, all of them except one got degrees in math and science. Her aunt was one of the first Black women to get a PhD in geology. Father was a physician and the second African-American to receive a PhD from Harvard in business.
Stephanie had her hand up, no?
Stephanie, and I see Jeffrey as well. So Stephanie, please.
Just going off of what Peggy said, I've heard a lot from the community saying that if we were to pick a name from, talking about the 2 separate groups again, that they would love to see, after researching about her and hearing about her, which a lot of people hadn't heard about her, heard of her before, but that they would love to see an African-American woman's name on more buildings because they're underrepresented.
Thank you. Jeffrey.
I think it's worth restating or underscoring that she's an American war hero. So her service was during a war, and it was a war fighting fascism, and that also has a small connection to today, or perhaps a connection to the previous name. So the war hero part for some people, maybe not folks in deep Gainesville, but in greater Florida, that's a big deal, and highlighting that with her would make a profound point, I think.
Thank you. Hal, what's our next item?
That's it on the list, but just for the sake of covering the way that the list sort of from a frequency count was discussed, I just put a note here to sort of mention it, that that there was also the sort of none or empty option on the non-person names. So both the person names and non-person names had potentially, with the 18 respondents, up to 90 choices that could have been made. And on the non-person names, 27 of those 90 choices were left empty. And the only reason that I'm mentioning it, and it's because of sort of what I've said earlier, it seems to me that, some of the discussion about this process from the first meeting and very early in the first meeting seemed more focused on person-based names. And I felt as though we weren't necessarily giving enough true sort of discussion about the non-person names. And this was sort of another one of those evidences for me that maybe we weren't taking those options seriously from the community. With that said, I'd like to also note that I think the nature of the discussions that we've been having have been very productive, and I'm very grateful for the degree of rigor and discussion that we as a committee have been having about the non-person names coming forward since then.
Thank you, Hal. Karen.
Since we finished discussing the names, I would like to make two corrections in terms of one of the people we discussed. Just for the record, Josiah T. Walls. There was an email that suggested that he had never been mayor of Gainesville. That's not true. I found a newspaper on the digital newspaper collection at the library at the University of Florida in the New Era, August 30th, 1873. It was noted that Dr. Watson Porter was nominated for mayor to fill the vacancy occasioned by the resignation of Honorable J.T. Walls. He had been the mayor of Gainesville. That's like the only paper for that year that they have in digital form. The other thing was some research I just did this morning. There was a book about Josiah T. Walls, and a page of it was circulated. The author was incorrect in saying that Walls' second wife was only 14 years old. I established that that was not true by going to the marriage records of the Alachua County Clerk of the Court Ancient Records. Walls and Ella Gass married on July 4th, 1885. If you go to the census for 1880, Ella Gass is shown at the age of 17. Her birth year is given as 1863. Then the next census record that's available is 1900. She's in Tallahassee, married to Josiah Walls at the time. Her last name is Walls, and it's consistent. Her birth year was, again, 1863. So when she married Walls, she was 22 years old. And that is a terrible error that was made in that book about Walls. So I just wanted to correct the record.
Thank you very much. And Flo, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Karen, for clearing up that discrepancy. I know that figured very prominently in some people's feelings about Josiah T. Walls. I would like to add, incidentally, that when I was visiting Selma, Alabama recently, I was able to visit a museum called the Civil Rights Museum, Civil and Voting Rights Museum, at the foot of what hopefully will be soon the formerly known as Edmund Pettus Bridge. And in that museum, the only person that was figured prominently from the state of Florida in that museum with a display is Josiah T. Walls. He is considered a nationally known civil rights leader, not only locally exalted, but nationally known. I just wanted to point that out as a fact that, and Zohara was there with us, so she remembers as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ashley.
I don't know if that mentioned the name of the log in the first. Just curious if you guys discuss my about naming spaces at the in regards to the ones that were still high interest, such as Pleasant Street and Union and Liberty and what have you. Just if that was discussed.
For the notes, I'm not sure I was following the question. If someone wants to restate it.
I sent an email out yesterday or before with the idea of, along with the name that we come up with, we would also suggest the spaces of the school.
Okay.
Maybe on the school map, mention this sidewalk is street, or bus loop is Fifth Avenue, or if whatever the second runner-up are the ones that are still, like all that we've shared so far has been awesome. I think they're all 3 degrees of separation. There's keywords that pop up with all of them: Union, the Academy. It's just, I think this is a great time for us to give acknowledgement in every possible manner in whole school, and you may go, that's possible.
Yes, I just for people who are watching on Zoom, Ashley had added an additional proposal to the work that we have really important names that have a lot of meaning, and the building will only acquire one name. And so a proposal was to be able to use the additional names that have relevance for the students to be able to name components of their school after these names, and perhaps take the process that we're doing to the student level process. Cully and then Hal.
I just have a question. I was thinking along that line already. I know the school, I'm sure the school has a cafeteria. I know it has a library. Does it have an auditorium? Any of those three spaces could have its own separate name also.
Yes, it has, I believe, all those spaces. I think there's many opportunities here. So I think it was a great proposal. Hal.
So I too am fond of the idea that the names, the person and non-person sort of place and facility names that have been discussed in this process should and could be used as a stepping stone to a much grander and richer and more complete discussion and lesson planning and celebration of African-American heritage in this community through this school and beyond. So I'm fond of that idea. I would like to suggest, though, that I personally feel like it might be best to allow the staff and faculty of the school to engage in that process on their own. But I think we could make some recommendations about some of the more prominent person and place names that they might consider as they explore ways to integrate it into their lesson planning. And then I'd also like to say, I feel like Ashley's suggestion is a great segue to talk more broadly to the degree that any of us feel like we have the knowledge or experience to do it, the process of truth and reconciliation. It's something I greatly want to learn more about because of this process and being a member of this community, and also because I teach social and cultural sustainability at UF, and I would very much like to be able to talk about truth and reconciliation when we are already talking about race and segregation and issues that are of importance. So at some point Carly, when you feel it's merited as the chair, I want to make sure that we talk about that today too.
So I do think we need to do that. And I guess something, it's 2:06 and we wanted to go till 3. I know I saw Kim's hand and Stephanie's hand, and I'm assuming you want to speak to this topic is that a yes? Yeah, okay. So Kim and then Stephanie, please.
So we actually do. I think I mentioned this earlier at an earlier meeting. We do have a group of teachers who have been working over the summer. We're loosely calling ourselves Teachers for Equity. And so we're developing age appropriate lesson plans to talk about some of these concepts, racism, bias, to our students, and also trying to incorporate more, as Peggy was saying, more local history into our lessons. I have no power at the school, but I love the idea of using those names as a springboard for education. And we're trying to get creative with it. We're working hard on that.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Good news.
I was actually going to say the same thing that Kim just said. So we do have a group that's working together, and I think that allowing them to just maybe giving this information over to the group instead of having, this being a recommendation from this, from us to the school board and school board to the school. I do think, and I think also, Hal said that we do want to, allow the teachers and our staff and the students to be, more involved in that and less of a, this is what you need to do kind of thing. And this is something we're already working towards. So I think that, and this group would love, all information because it's, we're enjoying that. So yeah, basically what Kim just said.
I don't think the committee has any interest in micromanaging the curriculum at Finley. I do think though, like it's a pretty awesome opportunity that you have some like world-renowned historians doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So that seems just like a pretty cool opportunity. But I agree, in the interest of time and the component of a nice segue, I think we do need to get to this discussion of really we need to talk about voting. So that's more like a logistical component, but I think we also need to talk about the spirit of what we are doing and why we are doing, and to kind of set the contextual framework for when we decide to step away and actually make our votes and go through that. And so I know we want to discuss truth and reconciliation, and I know we have other people who would like to make sure that they share their feelings about this experience, because it is it's personal as well as it's our relationship to our community, and we want to make sure that we establish kind of where we are standing on things. So I'm going to open it up to people who would like to speak with this. In the interest of time, because it is 2:09, I think it would be helpful for us to shoot to have this conversation go to 2:45 at the max, so then we can spend 15 minutes to really hammer out the logistics on how to vote. Is this something people are comfortable with? Just nod your head and shake your head no if you are not happy with that idea. Okay.
Sorry, could you just restate it, Carly? I want to make sure that.
So the goal is to have this more fluid, organic discussion till 2:45, where we can kind of just bring our minds together in this experience. And then at 2:45 to 3 o'clock, we will focus on the actual logistics and mechanics of how we are going to collect votes and process votes. And then I will just tell you, I think in all likelihood, we will need to meet tomorrow. But again, that is something we need to discuss the last 15 minutes of this meeting. So this is a very open-ended time. Who would like to speak first? Okay, I'll start. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think I've expressed quite a bit that I'm very much concerned about process. And I know that it's going to be challenging to make everyone happy. 19 people is a challenge to make happy. An entire community is going to be a challenge. And I'd like to say that I'm trying very hard to make sure that people feel heard, and people are having opportunities, and people are also sharing space. As far as discussions about a non-person versus a person, I mean, I've sat and I've pondered this many, many ways, and I can have an argument for every way. And I understand that people just have different values and different important things to them. And so I just would like you all to know that I respect all of that. I'm going to just try my best based on what I've heard to make a decision, but I'm also very comfortable with how we're going about these things. And I want to continue to focus on the process. Anyone else want to? Wow.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I appreciate your sort of intro, Carly, and I wanted to mention to the degree that it may or may not be helpful for the long-term archive, I had been trying to put together some resources in that shared Zotero folder, which if that's not a convenient format, I can change it to something more accessible for us and the public going forward. But I was trying to educate myself about Truth and Reconciliation, was trying to research and curate some information. And a lot of the things that I was finding seemed to be referencing Canada and their Truth and Reconciliation process with the Indigenous First Peoples here in North America. And I was trying to see if there was any discussion about sort of best practices or strategies or lessons learned in that process. And I haven't overtly found anything that adds clarity to any sort of best practices per se. But I do want to say that I share Carly's sentiment about the importance and sensitivity of this. I want to say that as a Caucasian, cisgender, heterosexual male, I recognize that this is a complex topic, that there's intersectionality across all these issues. We've already had those intersectionality come up in some of our discussion. I understand the importance of saying the names. I understand the importance of making sure that African Americans in this community have symbols and places and spaces that celebrate their heritage, and the leaders that have been so prominent in empowering them to persevere in the struggle for justice, as Zohara so eloquently framed, and the civil rights leadership. I want to say that I took students in one of my classes. We go to Atlanta for a field trip, and the most recent iteration, we went to the National Center for Civil and Human Rights, and it was a profound opportunity for our class to partake in the exhibitions that are there. I would like to see if and how our community can help this process be bigger and be more expansive beyond our direct tasks. I also wanted to mention that many of the people that I have had talking to me, both explicitly and sort of implicitly through, person to person, have suggested that they don't, I want to make it clear, they don't have a problem with a person name because the person is African American. I think the people who've expressed concerns about a person name are of a mindset that we're in a different point in history where maybe we've focused too much on naming things after people. And maybe we need to start moving beyond that. And I will reference as an example that many Indigenous languages are more verb-based than noun-based. And many Indigenous languages are less focused on people and things and sort of the cult of personality that becomes associated with those. And so I think some of that broader discussion is about this idea that maybe we also have a chance to change how we go about this. And I don't want any mention of using or not using a person's name to change the fact that we need to have this process honor truth and reconciliation and create symbols and opportunities for African Americans to celebrate their heritage. But I do think it's an opportunity to think more broadly about how we choose to honor people and history through public places. And I personally struggle with naming things after people, period, whether they're African American, whether they're Caucasian, naming a park, Tom Petty Park, I personally don't understand. Things of that nature, I think is where the essence of some of that conversation was, if that helps give it context.
Thank you. Rachel, your hand was up.
I'm just gonna wait for now. I kind of want to hear more perspectives before I speak.
Okay. Ashley.
Okay, I got it down now. Hit the unmute button for my living. So I'm a Gainesvillian. I've been here since second grade and graduated at US in 03. My mom's teacher, well, she taught for 40 years at Norton and Childs and et cetera, High Springs, you name it. Background for her, she was a music teacher, so she always taught history or math with music and so forth and so on. And she found those things to learn more to her kids. I say that in retrospect of just growing up as a student here in town, and I feel like the name of schools has been kind of neutral. High Springs, Middle. I live right next door to Middlebrook. My kids are proud manatees, but I just feel like sometimes we play it safe, but I'm also factual. So I just went back and there were 50 submissions for person names, and there's 106 for non-person names from the original list. So it seems like the community does want a non-person name, but I just want to make sure that it has value and something of pride and has a purpose, and something that can leave a legacy, not just a flat name. That's just my 2 cents.
Rachel, your hand is up now.
So I've definitely been considering everyone's perspective on this, and like as Carly said, like everyone has had great points and all deserve respect, especially since we all come from different backgrounds and different professions. Me personally, my parents, my mom immigrated from the Middle East, and I don't find any recognition or any identity, especially since there's a small Arab community in Florida, to the word terms like union and freedom, and because one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist and vice versa. And I find a recognition and identity from specific people that I look up to and that I can identify with, that promote these ideals that we've been talking about rather than the other way around. And I do think it's important that the school name of the former J.J. Finley was named for about 81 years, I believe, if I'm doing the math correctly. And I genuinely think putting a name of a specific person is a reparation and not in a way of whitewashing and continuing this systematic oppression that, again, we are just continuing this system of, hey, we're going to recognize this, but we're not going to fix it. And I think putting a specific name, you can go ahead and talk about every single person that comes along with that history. But I think that when you name it a very general name, we do not do anything there. Staying neutral in positions like this is when you side with the oppressor. And we learn from history that we have not learned from history, because if we learned from history, we would not be in this position right now. So I think this is an opportunity that we can take to really correct and show our Black community that they are American history and that they're going to be placed on the school's name, because we've been shown time and time again that Gainesville is racist. And I would never identify with a name that just says Union or Midtown or Pleasant Street. I really only look up to people and not just terms, because that's where we can really fight systematic oppression.
Peggy, and then Jeffrey, and then Chipper.
First, Rachel, thank you very much for sharing your passion. Thank you for that. Also, I want to point out that in the final list, there were over 150 names for people. So it was actually the majority. And I know that because I researched every one to provide the committee with more information on the people. And also in terms of not naming for people, I'll be ready to not name for a person once there's at least one Black woman on a school building.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yes, I'd like to talk briefly about an idea that I think Professor Ortiz brought up, and I want to apologize if I don't get this quite right, but it's this idea that something inappropriate happened in 1939. This honor was paid to this person who should not have had this honor paid to him, and we have this really unique opportunity to go back to 1939. This group here, and contemplate who that school should have been named for in 1939. It's a correction. It's a reparation. To some degree, and some historians might not like me characterizing this, but we're kind of revising the history, if I can say that. And we have an opportunity to sort of prosecute this crime that was committed against us. In 1939, they commit a crime against us by naming this school for him and having us talk about this fellow for 81 years, including in 2020, which was way too late. And I think there's some really strong power in that, in making that correction. I think about truth and reconciliation in this manner, that truth is a statement of facts. Facts are facts. They can't be argued. You don't have the right to your own facts. They're things that are established. For example, Karen's factual discovery that Josiah Walls' second wife was 22 when they were married. So it's a statement of facts. The reconciliation is about the giving of an apology and the acceptance of that apology. And between truth and reconciliation, there's a great deal of work. It's not a bureaucratic process in which we go from one place to the next place after having checked off certain boxes. It's a feeling that people have to have that we have reconciled. And the work that we're doing here right now is that work. And there's a lot more work that needs to be done. There's institutional apologies that should probably be made. And many other things that have to be made. And it's not up to us to decide when the reconciliation has occurred. It's up to the African American community. So we're making this investment here, and it is a reparation. It's a kind of reparation. And I'll close by saying that I'm really impressed with this group. That I think we've done a great job. We're all basically in the same place. It's actually quite surprising. And I think that we should all be proud of what we come up with at the end of this process. And I think Gainesville will be proud of what we've done as well.
Thank you. Chipper?
Yeah, and yell at me or something if I freeze. I've been having some intermittent connectivity problems over here, and I apologize. I wanted to mention, I appreciate these comments very much. When I think about truth and reconciliation, I think a lot about the word honor. The word honor has come to my mind often in the past few meetings. How do we honor people? Top of the list for me. How do we honor the African American community? But also, how do I honor you, committee members? And I've been inclined to listen more than talk, in part because you keep saying things that I was going to say more eloquently, and taking the wind out of my sails. But so just really appreciated what I've been hearing. One other group of people that I want to mention as far as honor, I do feel like we have a pretty significant opportunity to honor educators and teachers who have a very difficult job. This is personal opinion, and I think tend to be very underappreciated even now. I don't think by this committee, but I think even as a society, we're struggling to appreciate how difficult it is to teach and honor that. So that's really all I wanted to add, but I have been trying to think about that as well. How can we also honor educators, teachers in this process?
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak about Kali?
I'm a little bit embarrassed on the inside that before somebody said it a little while ago, I never thought about the fact of how few Black women are recognized on public facilities in this area. I can't think of any besides Rosa Williams and Wilhelmina Johnson, and that's not in the school system. So I would really like to see us focus on recognizing a Black woman, and particularly one who is highly educated and or worked as an educator. I think that would be, very appropriate to the fact that we're renaming a school and we want students to study that person and be inspired to scholarship because of that study. Thank you.
Sahara and then Hal.
Thank you. I am very much in favor of a person's name being put on the building, that school building. I think that the fact that we live in a racist society, and that includes Alachua County and Gainesville, and the history of African Americans has been hidden, has been obliterated across our country. And we are living in a time when finally, as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the struggles that have gone on before, that seem to have are now culminating in an awakening for many white Americans of the harm, the oppression, the very murder of Black people for so long. And that if we are truly interested in repairing some of the harm and some of the hidden history of our contributions as Black Americans in this country and in this county, I think we should name this building after a person who contributed much to changing the face of this country, right? And I certainly am in favor of that being a person who was in the 19th century, who worked to move our country toward becoming an interracial democracy. And here we are all these years later, and we have not achieved that. So I would like to honor those persons who fought hardest during the 19th century to bring that about.
Thank you. Hal?
I wanted to echo something that that Kali had said. I also am increasingly aware and taken aback at the lack of women, and in particular women of color, being recognized for their accomplishments in not just this community, but communities around the country. A theme that I've heard in discussions, again, both verbally and sort of in other ways, that I've tried to gather perspectives on the voices that I'm trying to represent. A common theme is that if a person is to be the honorary name for the renaming of this school, I think it's quite common that the voices rally around a woman of color as that name. One name that didn't didn't make our original criteria that I would like to just sort of mention as something that might be considered among all of these others in this conversation is Ruby Bridges, which appealed a great deal to students. And I know it doesn't meet the local nor the deceased criteria, but I just wanted to mention that that was a name that we did not talk about much, but I know that students know about. I know that Stephanie Walker talks about Ruby Bridges and her role as being the first student to, African-American student to integrate a segregated school in the South. And I just wanted to make sure that we sort of had a record of the importance of that individual and that she is already being discussed in the curricula. And then I'd also like to just say from a personal standpoint, I find it both alarming and sad that as a multi-generational Floridian, the way that I came to learn about the Rosewood Massacre was when John Singleton, the director, came to the state of Florida to film the movie in Orlando to tell the story of what happened to the prosperous African-American community of Rosewood right here in our backyard of Alachua County. And as a college student, I went home for the summer or for the spring break, and my father happened to be an extra and a stand-in for one of the actors in that film and asked if I wanted to get on the movie set during my spring break. And I had the good fortune of getting to be on that set for multiple days and interact with John Singleton and interact with Ving Rhames and Don Cheadle and several other actors who took great pride in the work that they were doing to tell the story of a community of Rosewood that we don't talk about in our Florida history. Tragically, it took me learning this story through the arts. It's also tragic that I learned about the Tulsa massacre by watching an HBO fictional series called Watchmen. And that something that is that prominent and that important in American history is not talked about to the point where people couldn't even imagine that it actually happened. I think that we need to do more service to African Americans in this community and beyond so that they know that they are an important part of this country's history, that we would not be where we are today in so many ways without the roles that they have played, and that for far too long, we have told an incomplete story of the beautiful history of what makes this multiracial country what it is. And I'm really honored to be a part of this committee. And I'm so sorry that members of this community in this country have dealt with this for so long. And I'm going to do everything in my power for the rest of my life to try to change that history so that we can truly honor what makes this country and this place so special. Thank you.
Thank you, Hal. And I think, so I'd like to say something about kind of bridging off of what Hal said. In this process, I think what affected me quite a bit, the telling of stories.
You can't, was that Faye trying to talk? Remember, Faye is on the phone.
Oh, yes, it is. So Faye, would you like to say something?
Well, yes. I've been listening and really feeling upset about the discussion. Not only this discussion, but the last two meetings. Good news is that I do have a therapist and I'm able to let go with her. And she suggested that I don't really have to talk, but just listen. But I'm going to say a few words. I graduated from Maitland Jones, 4th and 5th grade. And 5th to 6th grade, I went to Kirby Smith. Then I went to Howard Bishop. Then I went to Eastside. And I was put out of school over at Eastside by John Dukes because I was teaching Black history. But as I learned over in Upward Bound at the University of Florida, I would go back to school and try to teach Black history over at Eastside. He told me to stop, and I wouldn't stop. So he, along with my Uncle Russell Henry, who was part of the biracial committee, decided that it was time for me to be transferred over to GHS. which was one of the most racist places I've ever been to, and it still exists. I talked to a lot of students, and they're still racist. And like Zahara said, we live in a racist country, and especially in Alachua County. I left here and stayed in DC for 30 years. And I was able to survive because I met wonderful people there. Mayor and Barry and a whole lot of folks lived in DC, and I learned from them. And I learned that it was my responsibility to come back home and continue to struggle, to never give up. We've never given up, you know. And I also learned as a feminist that it's very seldom that people recognize Black women on anything. In 2015, when I went to the school board, I made the suggestion that they change the name of J.J. Finley, and I was totally ignored except by Dr. McNeely. And I knew it would come back around. I didn't know it would come this soon. But I'm so happy that we're at this point. And I made a suggestion that J.J. Finley be renamed Mary McLeod Bethune, because I had my feminist friends on, and I wanted a woman's name to be on one of the buildings in Gainesville. And so where I am right now is just really listening. I was going to vote for probably Mr. Walls, but I want to change my vote. You know, if we get to that point, I would change my vote to Parker. I think that's the last name, the physicist, for a lot of reasons. But I'm just really amazed too with the lack of sympathy and empathy and direction in this city, especially with white feminists. We have a lot of white feminists, or at least they call themselves feminists, but their racism comes out constantly. And, you know, I'm sitting here thinking about that as well as just looking at what's happening over in Gainesville. You know, City Hall getting over on us. And I know, you know, we're only supposed to be talking about the school board, but there's a relationship between the two, as well as the county. And I think, you know, if you're looking at the whole city, we have to really look at what happened with the county. I was the lead organizer for moving the Confederate soldier, Ojo, but no recognition came from that. And of course, that wasn't the reason why I wanted to move, but you would have thought that the city would have, you know, at least, you know, acknowledged the fact that we were able to move the Confederate soldier peacefully. And so like that word, peacefully, because it became a big deal. So I could go on, but I won't. But I just wanted to make a few comments. But that's it for me. But I have been listening, learning a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Rachel.
I really resonated with what Hal mentioned about the guilt, like especially like white guilt of not really you can never know everything, but it's really disheartening that I learned most of these names on this list. I went and looked up and tried to do as much research as I could, and there's just so much that comes up that you'll just never know. And I really do blame the fact that we've been suppressing this knowledge for so long that could have inspired so many individuals and really, you know, altered the way in which the United States functions. And I think education is the one way to do that. And I really do think that we have a really important impact in really, again, trying to bridge this back to how we're going to embody this in our decision, is that education is like the most important thing that we can do, because the renaming is just the first obstacle of dismantling a bunch of different oppression, like systematic oppression. This should be the easy part, not necessarily the easy part, because obviously we've had meetings, but this is one of the, I think, very simple parts of a very long process to reverse and give reparations to what we've done for over 400 years. And so I think that with that note, as a student who's trying to continue to learn as much as I can with the allotted time and the way in which, you know, we're restrained because we have to worry about, you know, healthcare and like a million things that are like, and the world's ending, it's fine. But I just think that we really need to take this opportunity and empower those who come next, because if we don't really tackle this obstacle and show that we can make the right decision so easily, that we're gonna show to the country, to our community, that we can't even make a decision and taking the first step of dismantling systematic racism.
Peggy.
Rachel, I want to ask, are you an undergraduate student? I'm so impressed. I wish that I had you in my class. I teach at Stetson and I teach African American history, and this is the textbook, which is filled with primary sources. It's over 1,000 pages. Rosewood doesn't appear in it. Carolyn Parker doesn't appear in it, even though there's a chapter on the Depression and what Black women were doing, and a chapter on World War II, what Black women and others were doing. Florida history tends to be overlooked, including by the 1619 project, because we had a date of 1513, and we could trace not only the history of slavery, but the history of a free Black conquistador who was the first African-American, so to speak, who came to Florida and traveled elsewhere. Wangarido, and Henry Louis Gates talks about him in his wonderful series on African-American history. But you talked about how this isn't discussed, and you've been looking at people, and there's so much you're enjoying learning. And I think part of the problem, and some people have mentioned being on the Black History Task Force in Alachua County. I'm a product of Alachua County schools, and it's obviously from before now, but this just wasn't taught, and we're still dealing with in Florida, although there's been a mandate for more than 2 decades to teach Black history, it's not being taught. Part of the problem is the textbooks, including textbooks produced in Texas that refer to enslaved people as migrant workers. Part of the problem is there's no requirement for African-American history to be part of the curriculum for students, student teachers, right, for the education curriculum. And so it's a luck of the draw whether a teacher has that knowledge base. So when you talk about what more can be done, I wonder from the education component, Kim, you mentioned at the very beginning of this process that you would like to tap some brains here and find out what more can be done. Maybe that's something that only if people want to be involved, that there could be something to carry on from this. And I'd be very happy to talk about that, not just local, but Florida and US. It's one of my passions, teaching not just American history, but particularly I teach African-American history and Native American.
Kali, and then Richard, and then Rachel.
I'm so glad what the last 2 speakers brought up. I am a member of the Black History Task Force, and we were initially elated last August of last year that the school board was going to have a African-American and or African history course at every high school in the county. And they determined that they would have these classes no matter how many students enrolled. Most places they ended up with a waiting list. It was, people really wanted it. But then the book they chose, it's so important that the book be phenomenal. As you said, teacher education may not include it, but as long as the teacher is not personally biased against teaching it, they can learn the first couple times they teach the course with a fantastic book, they can learn it too. In grad school, I took a Pascal computer course. I had to take an elective outside my department. The department head taught it and knew nothing about Pascal, but he learned it with us because he had a fantastic book. The book they're using now begins with Africa from 5,000 BC. Can you hear me still? It begins with Africa from 5,000 BC to 1500 AD, and does not have a whisper about the Moorish occupation of the Iberian Peninsula. How do you skip the people who taught Columbus there was such a thing as sailing on the ocean. So it is very important, you know, changing this name is a very significant symbol. But the nuts and bolts are really more important. And so we got to help systematically. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the time is up allotted for this discussion. I move that we add another 5 minutes to let other people.
I would agree. So I believe it was Richard, then Rachel and Zahora. I'm not sure who had their hand up first. So Richard, please.
All right. I would like to build off of what Zahara and Hal said a few minutes ago. I moved to Jacksonville in 1968 as a very young American history teacher, and almost immediately got involved in an organization called Jacksonville Citizens for a Creative Curriculum, because as Zahara mentioned, Black history at this time in American history books basically didn't exist. The only thing that was taught about Blacks was as far as slavery was concerned. So we worked fairly hard to try and get more Black history into the American history classes at the 8th grade and the 11th grade. I think as a society, as a culture, we've come a long way, but man, is there a lot of unfinished business ahead of us. And I'd just like to say that I've been really honored to be a part of this committee and to meet all of you, most of whom I did not know before a couple of weeks ago, because this is a part, admittedly a small part, but a part of correcting what was done, and more than that, what was omitted in the past. Thank you.
Rachel and then Zohara.
Ms. Simmons can go first. She had her hand up.
I wanted to note that Kali, I've been here 20 years, and when I was asking around, who should I, meet? Who should I be in touch with as a activist and somebody working on civil rights matters? And of course, one of the first names was Kali. And I just wanted to note that Kali has been working, he can say at least 25 years to get Black history taught in our schools. And he and Faye Williams founded what is now called the African American History Task Force. It was originally the Black History Task Force. And
Carol Thomas.
And Carol Thomas, thank you. And there has been a real struggle to get Black history taught in the Alachua County schools. And I think it is finally moving toward fulfilling some of the mandate of the bill that Peggy mentioned, which I believe, and correct me guys if I'm wrong, is over 25 years. The state legislature passed a bill mandating the teaching of African American history, Native American history, and women's history. And we have, I believe, and again, Kali, I think we have 6 counties out of our 67 that have met the standards laid out by the state African American History Task Force. So the foot dragging, the difficulty in getting this done, and whatever progress has been made is due to community people like Kali and Faye Williams on the front lines fighting for this. And they get no recognition at the county level or the city level for the work that they have been doing and are still doing.
Thank you. Rachel.
I was actually going to say about the same thing. We brought this up, I believe, in June, or not June, when the NAACP set up their resolution to get this name change. Why did it take for, this uprising with the Black Lives Matter movement, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and like all of this commotion for what Faye and Kali have been working for to get mentioned? And why did it take the NAACP to, when people ask the school board, they are elected to represent who is asking them for specific things. And I just want to make a note that, again, we have Black people fighting for the right things and they're not listened to. And I definitely think that we need to reconsider that. We need to put Black people, African Americans, on school names to inspire and to reassure the community that we're listening. And lastly, to note on education, I do think it's important that we also mention, but this can be talked about later with Kim, that it's not only African American history, but I think Afrocentric history and studies, because I think that, again, African American history is taught within a Eurocentric lens, and I think we need to reconsider that as well, but that can be a different conversation.
Thank you. And the one thing I was wanting to talk about, I really want to thank you, Karen, for taking the time to clarify the information on Josiah T. Walls, because I think the other thing is, one, I think it's very clear we have a lot of work that we need to do, but there is also a huge responsibility of cleaning up the facts. I think, unfortunately, we have history and who is telling the history and who wants to taint or smear the history. And I think we need to really push this and make sure this doesn't happen. And not only just in our history, but in our current times, we are still having this similar type of a situation where people are being painted unfairly, and misinformation or gaps in stories. And so I think it's important for us to focus on history, but we also need to make sure that the history that's being taught is accurate and is truthful, because there are agendas occurring, and I think we all witnessed that in this experience. And again, Karen, I really thank you for doing that for us, because I think that's what we need continually.
History is not history unless it is the truth. Abraham Lincoln.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that our time has expired for the extra time that we had decided on.
Okay, so in order to also respect our time, and we did hope to adjourn at 3. So we had talked in the past about the ranking component, and then we take our ranking scores and we go through the system that Jeffrey King had mentioned way at the beginning. And we had voted at that time that was the system that we were going to utilize. And so I guess what I would like to do is I will throw out an idea and we can bounce around the idea. But the thought is that each of us rank order, and we submit them through email. And then we have those of us process the system that Jeffrey King had shared, where when the lowest person's nomination gets moved to their second person, and we go through, and eventually what we'll do is hopefully each of us will kind of check each other's homework and make sure that we have the person who would have over 50% of the votes. And I'm sure I can ask Jeffrey to explain this a little bit more, because I'm skipping a few things. But the component would be that we have this vote not during this meeting. This is something we can take some time to process. Obviously, we've had a lot to think about. But to meet up tomorrow and for us to actually vote and accept this vote collectively as another acknowledgement of the process and appreciation of our choices in going down this matter. And so I'm throwing that out there. And Hal, I know you have your hand up, but Jeffrey, could you just take a moment and kind of discuss the rank order a little more fluidly than I did?
Okay, so I sent an email a few days ago. The subject line is ranked choice voting. It's a separate thread, so I know it's hard to follow all these emails, but if you check your email and look for a ranked choice voting in the subject line from me. I sort of outlined, I sketched one way to do this, and it's just a proposal. And if folks want to go in a different direction, that's fine. But the idea is that we will all vote by email. And so we will all write our own email in which we rank our choices. And I'm going to suggest that we rank 15 choices. And there's a mathematical reason to do more than less. We probably don't need more than 5. I know I see people scratching their head, but 10 to 15, we rank them. And then you send an email back into the whole group. And then anybody who wants to count this, who understands how to conduct a ranked choice voting count, will count it. And then they'll send their result, their count, back into the email to the whole group so everybody can see it. And as long as 2 or 3 of us independently count this vote, I think we're good. It would be great if everybody counted it. And then what we have to do at the end is we have to vote to accept this vote, accept the result that we have. And it's that simple. It's very transparent if we're sending things in and out of the group email, and if the counting is done independently. I'm confident that half a dozen of us could watch that 1-minute video that I attached and understand how to do this. The threshold is 10 votes. So if at any point in the counting, one of the choices has 10 votes, then the count is over and that's the winner. We go through rounds of counting, and each round of counting, the lowest recipient, that vote is discarded, and that person's second vote then gets added into the count. It's not that complicated. It's a little complicated, but it's not that complicated. So that's the idea, and we can do it a different way if you'd like.
Zohara.
Why do we need 10 or 15? Why so many?
There's a mathematical reason. So what might happen is, let's say you vote for 5 very unpopular choices that nobody else cared for, and through the rounds, your vote, because you keep voting for a choice that's not popular, your vote will end up falling off the end of the process, and eventually you won't be included in the counting. So by ranking 10, you'll stay in the conversation. I don't think this is going to happen. I think that we're probably going to end up with 2 or 3 rounds of voting. I think there's probably 2 or 3 favorites. And it's just for the possibility, it's a mathematical possibility that that we do have a great deal of diversity in what we choose, and that we end up with low totals. And so if we have low totals, we need to be able to access your 6th, your 7th, your 8th choice in order to build up to that threshold of 10.
Hal and then Flo.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say a couple things. One, from a technical standpoint, I'm happy to do what I've been doing with Google and try to summarize the information as it comes in via email and put it there so that it helps for anyone on the committee to be able to do what Jeffrey is talking about, with being able to do counts, and then everybody can kind of vet those counts. And I realize we all have a chance to edit that, so everybody would have to make sure that they are watching the votes that they're ascribed with, so that it matches the email. But that is one way that I can make it available so everybody can see it in a clean spot. And if it's helpful, Zohara or anyone else that's Faye that's previously been asking for PDF format, I'm happy to export it and share it as a PDF. And then I also wanted to say that just to make sure that I sort of understood from the clerk notes in past meetings, I actually went back and watched a fair amount of the first meeting to make sure that sort of I understood what we talked about and voted about with the ranked choice. And it does seem as though I don't have like an official number in the clerk notes or anything, but it does seem as though, there was a collective vote to move forward with ranked choice, and Carly sort of stated that from a consensus standpoint. So I think if everybody is still comfortable with that, it seems as though we've already got sort of an authorization to do that. But there was a comment that that was made where Jeffrey sort of said, if we have a definitive, single name, I think, and Jeffrey, feel free to chime in because I don't want to misstate what you were sort of saying. You were sort of implying that it would eliminate the chance that the school board could choose to do whatever they wanted. Was kind of the way that it was referenced. And I wanted to just make sure that everybody rereads the original task order that we were given. The county board has an opportunity to take or not take whatever recommendations we give, and they can pull any name they want from the list that is provided. So while I am in agreement that I think giving a single name as sort of this ranked choice winner makes sense for the nature of our deliberations, I think it would also make sense for us to give some context for, let's say in particular in this case where we're talking about person names and non-person names, which is a fairly nuanced conversation that we've been having. And there's a lot of sort of back and forth in the community about this. I think it may make merit that if a person name is first or a non-person name is first, whatever the highest ranked one of the other category, that we give that context so that the county board knows that that was the other categorical name at the top of the list. It doesn't mean that we don't say that our recommendation was both. I see Jeffrey nodding his head no, but I fundamentally want you all to know that I'm in a disagreement with them not having context for both our highest ranked person name and non-person name. It doesn't mean that I'm going to obstruct a person name being our collective choice, but this county board is going to do whatever they want to do. I think we need to give them the context so that they can make an informed choice, is my personal opinion.
So Flo and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, I'm asking for clarification. I think Jeffrey's going to address the question that Hal just raised, but I'm just asking for clarification. We would submit a 10 rank, our 10 weighted list, and then the ballot gets cut down if there's not 10. Say for instance, my first choice is Buttercup Academy. Nobody picks Buttercup Academy. That would fall off the ballot, and then we would be provided another ballot with the remaining choices that are available, and then we do another vote. Is that how it would work? Okay,
No.
sounds like we're going to get both questions answered by Dr. King here.
Your butter would fall away, and then your second choice, which let's just say is, I don't know, coffee, that then becomes your first choice. And so you have 10 choices. So if you keep losing a choice, your next one slips up.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification.
Kali, is this about Hal's point or about the mechanics of it?
This is about ranked choice. At the charter review, somebody came to really promote this to us, and how they explained it is that ranked choice voting allows you to build into one round of voting several rounds. It's like having a vote and a runoff and maybe another runoff, depending on how many choices you make, without having to rerun the entire process. By tabulation, you're building in multiple rounds of voting.
So Chipper does need to leave soon. So Jeffrey, can you please speak? But we are past the 3 o'clock point. So let's also try to move this along. Jeffrey.
We're all familiar with a runoff election where someone doesn't get 50% and then there's another election. And so we all have to go back downtown to the polls and vote again. So this is the exact same idea, except it's called instant runoff, in which you're already casting your second vote and you're casting your third vote if there's another runoff, and you're casting your fourth vote if there's yet another runoff. And by casting 10 votes, you guarantee that we have enough information to keep counting in these rounds in this instant runoff to get to a point at which we have 50% threshold achieved by the eventual winner. I want to talk a little bit about what Hal talked about, though. I do think there has to be context. We have to explain to the school board, to the superintendent, and then the school board why and how we came up with our choice. and the historical context about who this person is and why they're important and why we think that this is relevant. This is something that might involve a group of people or several people composing a one page or a half a page narrative that presents it to them. I'm opposed to, and if we're going to talk about this and make this presentation, I'm opposed to giving them any choice. I think we should give them one name and that's it. And they don't have any way of squirming around within that. I'm still talking, Hal. They don't
They
have
have a
any way
choice,
of,
just so you know, technically they have the choice.
no, they can do whatever they want. The school board can always do whatever they want. But if we make a strong statement to them with one recommendation, they don't have the ability to move around inside that one recommendation and undermine the will of this group of 19 people. And so if it's a place, that's awesome. Let's give them the place. If it's a person, let's give them the person. But I don't think we should give them a vague recommendation in which they then have the ability to interpret what we intended at all. I think that's a mistake.
So I'm gonna actually stop it right here, because I think what we're doing is we're probably starting a conversation that we need to have tomorrow. Tonight, we need to vote, we need to do the rank ordering, and then tomorrow we can really start talking about this next step, because I'm pretty confident this isn't a 5-minute conversation. Rachel, I know you had your hand up. I'm hoping it's about logistics.
Yeah, it is. I wanted to know for the 10, are we talking about combining non-person and person, or again, are they separate still in 10 and 10?
Everything is connected now. It's you have 25 names to pick from, whether they are person or non-person, and you rank order them 1 through 10.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Roger, you had your hand up, and Richard.
It was just about how many, so I'm good.
Okay, 10, and I will send a follow-up email. So just to confirm all of this.
Okay. And will you send all the choices as well?
Yes, I can do that too.
All right.
And don't put it in that awfully long link. Would you send it as a separate?
Thank you.
Totally fresh, new email. Yeah. Richard, did you?
No, you answered it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. I think we had a great productive day. Everybody's homework is rank 1 through 10 and respond to the email that I will send you within like the next 20 minutes. You are welcome to calculate on your own. And I'm asking you, could you hold off on sending your rank order calculation until tomorrow morning to give everybody just some time to process so we don't influence votes? And tomorrow we will meet at 1 o'clock, same place. Sound good?
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Carly, I'm not sure that I can make it tomorrow, but I will let you know.
Okay, thank you. And please make sure you submit your vote. And
yes.
So I have a technical question though. In ranked choice voting, is it historically rolling and open for everybody to see everybody's votes as they're saying it? Or does this need, do these choices need to be sent to an independent person not on the committee so that the committee members are not seeing what everybody else's votes are and just sort of waiting until someone else votes and then playing off of that? Because that, to me, that does not seem to fit the spirit of a ranked choice process, which democratically would actually be done blindly.
so, okay, so if that is the direction we want to go, a real easy fix, and the spreadsheet builds itself, is I could build a Google form with 1 through 10 and everybody fills it in. And no one sees it until everybody is submitted. But then what we do is we run into, or do we want to give ourselves a timeline tonight? Like, is it 8 o'clock everybody has to submit their scores, or what are we thinking? We can do it a few ways.
Let's say 9 o'clock in the morning.
To have your vote submitted?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about, people not copying, I don't think people here are going to copy. I think people have their own minds and they're going to put it down what they think. But if we don't want everybody seeing everybody's could we give a time by which we all have submitted our 10 names?
And do we like it on the Google form where then you guys just fill it in and no one?
No offense, Carly. This is not a slight to you as chair, but I don't think anyone,
So
I don't think anyone should have access to that form that's part of the voting. And if
Well,
you
I'm
make the
really
form, you have access to the form. And I fundamentally am not comfortable with that.
okay, well, I'm fundamentally not comfortable with us sending it to, who are you even talking about?
I don't know, but we're all going to know what we voted for, and if the record comes out and you're represented incorrectly, you can call it out. I think the nature of some of the correspondence that has happened outside of our Zoom session suggests to me that I'd rather just say that I'm not comfortable with this being this rolling process to make sure that everybody feels like they're doing this democratically. I'm not trying to be a stickler about it, but it doesn't seem to fit the spirit of what ranked choice is. Otherwise, we're just having this conversation and we're playing off of each other. And based on what someone says, someone else is like, well, then I'm going to make sure I put these names in because they're not being represented.
Okay, so Hal, I'm going to throw it back at you. Come with a solution. What's your idea? Like, who do we send this to? I'm not quite sure.
Looks like Roger has an idea.
Yeah.
Roger.
Let's, for what Hal's saying, let's say at 9 o'clock in the morning, you can't send it till 9 o'clock in the morning. Everybody send it directly to you at 9 o'clock. So you don't send it at 8, you don't send it at 7, you don't send it tonight. Just everybody at 9 o'clock in the morning will send it right to Carly.
To only me or to everyone?
It doesn't matter. We can send it to everybody. I don't care. I mean, send it to everybody right at 9 o'clock. That's fine.
Okay.
Everybody, but not till 9 o'clock. So you have all night to tabulate yours. At 9 o'clock in the morning, you hit send.
To everybody.
To everybody. Yes.
That's
yes.
fine.
To everybody. That's fine.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Also, we have one member who wasn't present today. We'll be back in the morning. She does not have a laptop, so she would need to do hers at 8 or 9 in the morning anyway. So.
Okay. Okay.
That would take care of that.
Paul is not on also, right?
So yeah, I think this can go back to the email. We'll just have all the instructions and we'll have that taken care of.
Rachel.
I'm just scared that if we do it in the morning, that we won't have enough time to do all those calculations in time to get the end result, unless someone's like absolutely free to do that calculation and everyone double checks. Only reason I would suggest to do it tonight at 9 is that way we can have overnight each one of us go ahead and make sure that we have the right calculation down, or like get it to the end period, like the end point. So that's just my suggestion. Because that still gives us a couple of hours to go ahead and rank, and that we have all night. Whoever wants to stay up till 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to do the calculations, and then have the final. When we get into the meeting, we can talk about the end choice.
Just so you know, there's one person that does not have a computer at home. So they will not be able to do theirs till they arrive here. So
9 a.m.
I just think 9 a.m.'s just,
Can she do it at 9 a.m.?
Good.
Or before 9 a.m.? I know she'll come here.
So
would that person feel comfortable calling you, giving you the 10 names so you could email it?
Or writing them down on a sheet of paper and taking a photo and sending it through like text message or something.
I mean, I think she can do it earlier than 9, but it would be in the morning. And it doesn't really matter if everybody else has done it, she does hers at 9, it's gonna tabulate it. It's gonna be, I don't think it's gonna take all day to figure that out, is it?
Okay, I think it sounds like this should be fine.
What's the final then? What's the time that we have to have it in by?
So is it 9 p.m. tonight that everyone sends it? No sooner?
Just 9, well, okay. Well, one of them won't happen till tomorrow morning.
Okay.
I'm clearly in the minority here, so I'm going to do whatever the committee wants.
I would say
to
9
do.
a.m. in the morning.
But I just want to reiterate to everybody that I echo everybody's sentiment today that we have done strong, good, defensible deliberations and work in the committee thus far. Let's make sure that whatever we do in these final steps are not going to be questioned by anyone in this community. I think it's imperative that the community feels comfortable with the process that this last steps take place in. I apologize earlier sounding firm about it. I'm not trying to be difficult to Carly or anyone in this committee. I just want to make sure that we all feel as proud about the outcome as we do about where we've gotten to at this point today.
Thank you. Kim?
So it does seem like there's a member of our committee that has an equity and access situation. I would like to be very aware of that, especially considering all the work that we have done.
Jeffrey, thank you.
I have a great deal of respect for everything that's been said. Maybe, and I'm just suggesting this, we revisit the idea that we all have to send it at the same time. Nobody else here is going to influence my vote. I could look at all your votes and it's not going to affect me. And I have a feeling that the vast majority of us are in that same position, and that we could just send them at our convenience before 9 a.m. and we would all be just fine. And this can be counted in about probably 20 minutes, but we do need a couple people to count it. So it can't just be one person. So there have to be a few other people who are willing to watch the 1-minute video and take out a piece of paper and do what is essentially a pretty simple GRE problem to figure out who won the election.
Carly, if you're comfortable doing the Google Sheet, that would allow asynchronous entries and you would be the only one that has access to it. And if we as a committee say that's okay, then it would come, and we could say the deadline is by 9 tonight, and anyone can send them whenever they want. And if Jeffrey wanted to send his now, he's not, it's not altering the deliberations, because you had previously said, let's wait until tomorrow to send stuff so that we could let things settle. And then that would result in a Google spreadsheet that would be very easy to then convert into our shared documents for counting. I think that that's a fair way, and we would all just have to be in agreement that you're going to honor the integrity of that process and have access to that document until everybody's results come in, and then it gets pushed over to our shared Google Sheets for curating. That will ensure that we can still do it speedily. I mean, does that meet the integrity, Jeffrey, of what you're saying? I mean, it's fundamentally the same. She just has the spreadsheet.
It is fundamentally the same, but it involves a lot of apps and Google Docs and very confusing things.
It's just a website you go to. And
I understand how to use it.
It's not.
Yeah, I understand how to use it. I'm speaking for the large group. If we just send an email, it's the simplest way to do it. We respond to Carly's email presenting the vote to us, and it's real straightforward.
I think, let's face it, we've all been trying to influence each other for the last 4 meetings. So our emails aren't anything new. You can choose to accept or dismiss, and we move on. Because that's kind of what's happening as it is.
And I'm fine with it. We just have to know there's that one member that will not be able to vote till in the morning.
Right. And I think that we should, I guess I'm kind of leaning toward get it in whenever you can. And let's just go that way. And pretty much starting at hopefully 9:30, all of us are really trying to kind of, get the same answer. But there's really no other way to put it.
I want to say that I certainly want to submit mine by email and not be trying. I've got so much on me that I'm about to blow my stack. I don't work with Google forms. So I want to be able to put my names down and send them for the whole group to see. I'm willing to do it by 9 tonight. I'm willing to do it by 9 in the morning. Somebody else who deals with Google spreadsheets, put them in there and tabulate it. I'm not doing it.
Carly, I don't mean to cut this short, but principal has another place she has to be, and she's responsible for shutting this down. And she was supposed to, she thought she was gonna be done at 3, so she's kind of being held up here.
I move to vote by email in the manner that was described in the ranked choice voting email that I described. That's a motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Or actually, we have
Aye.
you're good with discussion. Raise your hand. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12. Faye, I'm assuming your hand is up. I have 12 without Faye. I believe I have 13 with Faye, if she's.
Faye is
Both
still.
hands up.
Your hand's
Both
up.
hands up. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. Both hands up. Don't shoot. Don't shoot.
Okay, so yes, in the interest of time, send your ranked top 10 an email to the whole group, and we'll just start building this spreadsheet and breaking this down. And we'll start really processing it tomorrow after 9 o'clock, and we'll meet at 1 to discuss.
But we'll wait to get the email from you to respond back to it. Is that?
Yeah, give me 20 minutes.
Okay. All right.
Carly, what was the final count? I just want to put it in the clerk notes.
I had 13. If I counted correctly.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time.
Have a great day, everybody.
Everybody, what's left of it? Bye-bye.
Okay.
You too, Faye. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy trails.